Well, with the Republican and Democratic national conventions over and done with, analysts are noting the different approaches that we saw from each side. For example, Republicans rarely mentioned President Obama by name, while Democrats, they came out strong in their criticisms of Governor Mitt Romney. So what can we take away from the conventions as the campaigns begin their final sprint toward the November election? Let's bring in our panel, Fox News contributor and syndicated columnist Cal Thomas and former Democratic Congressman for Pennsylvania, Joe Sestak. Thank you both for joining us.
Good to be here, Heather.
So I want to ask you both about your overall perception of both conventions. Let's begin first with the DNC that just wrapped up in Charlotte. Cal, I'll begin with you. What's your take?
Well, I was at both conventions, Heather, and I thought the Democrats engaged in some political dressing. They stole a lot of themes from the Republicans. We've all heard them before. My mother, my grandmother scrimped and saved, sewed my clothes together. My father had to walk through the snow with no shoes for 20 miles, and then when he got there was no lunch, and he had to shoot squirrels for lunch. The difference between the Republican and Democratic stories on that, of course, is that the Republican convention was promoting self-help, persistence, do-it-yourself, and not rely on government. And the Democratic convention was saying, okay, my mother and grandmother and grandfather did all this stuff, but it was still a wicked and oppressive country, and they did it in spite of that. So those were the two different themes. I thought after the Democratic convention I was watching something from Venezuela, not the United States.
Congressman Sestak, what is your take?
Well, I thought both conventions did well in what the general overall purpose was. In the Republican convention, they made Mitt Romney appear, and he is, a very human, charitable, religious man. And I think that's what they need to do, identify this candidate better than he had been able to himself. On the other hand, I thought, particularly by Bill Clinton, at the Democratic convention, they laid out the case very well of why there is a choice. That wonderful phrase he used is, you know, President Obama got handed over a big mess, and because he didn't clean it up again, the team that handed it to him said, give it back to me right now. And I think, though, to Cal's point, he's absolutely right, at least halfway. This is a choice about the Republicans very well saying, we are a nation of individual freedoms, and we don't want our government to interfere with that. But President Clinton, with President Obama, laid out what is really an historical fact. Government can also enhance our individual freedoms, women's rights to vote, or laying down roads and an infrastructure like the internet in rural communities that can enhance our individual opportunity. Both of those two values of America's character is what I think this nation, in the commonsensical way of those individual voters, understand is America is about. Protect us from government, but at the same time use it as a tool accountably to enhance our individual opportunity.
So I want to talk specifically about undecided voters. And I was just reading a Gallup poll here that talks about the number of undecided voters actually down significantly. This poll found that it was hovering anywhere between 6 to 8%. This time in 2008, the number of undecideds was 11%. There's another Washington or Wall Street Journal poll that actually puts the number of undecided down even further at just 3%. Which convention did a better job of swaying those undecided voters? Cal?
Well, you know, it's hard to say, Heather. Frankly, I think if you're undecided at this point, you probably shouldn't be allowed to vote. I mean, come on. We've been saturated with commercials, campaign commercials from both sides, the super PACs, inundated with all kinds of things. Frankly, though, I had not seen the political wing of the Democratic Party, the left political wing of the party, exert itself with such force, frankly, since Chicago in 1968, which, of course, was then in the middle of the Vietnam War. I was frankly astonished if the Democrats want to reach out to the middle and to the undecided voters. That convention looked like it was all about abortion, contraception, same-sex marriage. Is that really what concerns most of middle America? I think it's the economy and job that's number one, and that's why I think Romney and the others who spoke at the Republican convention had the advantage on that issue.
Yeah, or maybe they've seen these polls and they've determined that there aren't a lot of people at this point that are still undecided, so they were rallying their base. So, Congressman Sestak, what do you think?
Yeah, Heather, what I think is that the conventions did not understandably move the undecided voters, who are, as you just said in the about a few minutes before we came on, Florida is about 1% is dividing the two candidates. The undecided voters aren't moved by a lot of the political advertisements, the short 30 minutes, the negativity. What they're waiting for is the debates. Look, those debates in the Republican primary meant a lot. And if you're undecided right now, or some of the polls show 20-25% of those who say right now they're for each candidate are willing to switch their votes, they know America's going through a pretty tough time. And there you're going to have the debates where you're not stage managed. You're up there by yourself. And they're waiting to see if they're going to give more specificity to these vague, at times, types of promises. That's going to be the determinant on both domestic policy and foreign policy, which is the last one that's going to be had. That's where substance is going to make a difference.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Joe. Yes, absolutely right. And you saw what the debates did for Mitt Romney. They honed his skills. He was able to defeat a very, very good field, especially Newt Gingrich and Rick Santorum. And I agree with Joe. I think the debates are going to be the heavyweight version of the Thriller in Manila. It's going to be a lot of people watching.
All right. Thank you both for joining us. Definitely appreciate it. The Thriller in Manila. All right. Thank you, Greg.
Go for